Right now, you believe you're making a choice. You are reading these words, deciding whether to keep going, forming an opinion. It feels like you. It feels deliberate. It feels like the conscious, rational version of yourself sitting in the driver's seat of your own mind, steering. But here is what the science actually shows. The decision was already made. Not by you. Not the you that feels like you. 7 seconds before you became aware of choosing, a different part of your brain had already committed. The conscious experience of deciding, that came after. You were the last to know. This is not a metaphor. This is one of the most uncomfortable findings in the history of neuroscience. And once you understand it, you will never experience a decision the same way again. In 1983, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that should have been unremarkable. He asked volunteers to flick their wrist whenever they felt like it, any time they chose. While they did, he measured two things: the electrical activity in their brain using EEG, and the moment they became consciously aware of the urge to move. What he found changed everything. The brain showed a distinctive spike of electrical activity, now called the Readiness Potential, that appeared up to a full second before the person reported feeling the conscious urge to move. The brain had already started preparing the action before the conscious mind knew anything about it. A second. That sounds small, but in the language of neuroscience, a second is an enormous gap. Later research pushed this further. A 2008 study by John Dylan Haynes at the Charité University in Berlin used fMRI scanning, which gives far more detail about which brain regions are active, and found that activity in the prefrontal cortex and parietal cortex could predict which hand a person was about to use up to 10 seconds before they reported making the decision. 10 seconds. The conscious choice felt real, felt immediate, felt like theirs, but it was already written in the brain long before it surfaced. So what does that mean? What is actually making your decisions if it is not the conscious you? The answer lives in a part of your brain so old it barely has words for what it does. Beneath the thinking cortex, beneath the rational, language-using, self-aware layer of the brain you identify with, there are older structures that have been processing information about your environment since before you took your first breath. They are faster. They are more powerful. They operate entirely outside your awareness. And they almost always go first. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio spent decades studying patients with damage to specific regions of the brain. He found it as something counterintuitive. Patients who had lost the ability to feel emotion as a result of certain brain injuries also lost the ability to make even simple decisions. They could analyze, they could reason, they could list pros and cons endlessly, but they could not choose. Without emotional input from the older, deeper brain structures, the rational mind spun in circles. Damasio called this the somatic marker hypothesis. The idea that decision-making is not primarily a logical process. It is a bodily, emotional one. Your gut, in the most literal neurological sense, is involved in every decision you make. The older brain is not getting in the way of good decisions. It is the engine of all decisions. Think about the last time you made a choice you could not explain. You walked into a room and immediately did not trust someone. You said no to an opportunity that looked perfect on paper. You reached for your phone without any awareness that you had decided to reach for it. That was not irrationality. That was your ancient decision-making system doing what it was built to do. Scanning, calculating, concluding. All before your conscious mind had even framed the question. There is a term for this in psychology. It is called System 1 thinking, popularized by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman in his landmark work on how the mind actually operates. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional, and largely unconscious. It runs almost constantly, processing the world at a speed conscious thought could never match. System 2 is the slow, deliberate, effortful reasoning you think of as thinking. The uncomfortable truth, Kahneman documented across decades of research, is that System 2 does far less work than it believes it does. Most of what you experience as careful, rational decision-making is actually System 1 reaching a conclusion, and System 2 constructing a story to explain it afterward. The story feels real. That is the problem. And that is the part that should really unsettle you. Your brain is a meaning-making machine. It cannot tolerate the idea that its own choices happened without it. So it fills in the gap. After the older brain commits, the conscious mind creates a narrative. A reason, a justification, a feeling of intention, and then experiences that narrative as the actual cause of the action. This is called confabulation. Not lying, not self-deception in the way we usually mean it. It is the brain doing what it does automatically, stitching coherent experience out of processes that are fundamentally unconscious. You are not aware of choosing. You are aware of having chosen. This is why people so often cannot explain their real motivations. Not because they are hiding something, because the actual decision happens somewhere they do not have access to. What are those deep brain systems actually responding to? The answer is everything your conscious mind is too slow to notice. Micro expressions, the fleeting muscle movements that cross someone's face in under a fifth of a second, changes in the pitch or rhythm of a voice, subtle asymmetries in a space, smells so faint they register below the threshold of conscious detection, the way a situation pattern matches to something that once caused you pain or pleasure or danger. Your unconscious brain is running a continuous, high-speed threat and reward assessment that would take your conscious mind hours to replicate, if it could replicate it at all. And evolution made it this way on purpose. In an environment where survival decisions needed to happen in fractions of a second, there was no time for deliberation. The branch moves. You move. Thinking about whether to move would get you killed. The unconscious system is not a bug left over from a more primitive time. It is the most refined decision-making architecture the planet has ever produced. It is the reason you are alive right now to read this. But here is where it gets complicated. That same system, exquisitely tuned to a world of predators and tribal politics and physical survival, is now operating in a world of mortgages and job interviews and long-term relationships. The gut feeling that tells you to run is also the one that tells you to avoid the conversation you need to have. The pattern matching that kept your ancestors alive is the same process behind snap judgments about strangers and self-defeating habits you cannot seem to break. The ancient hardware is not neutral. It carries the history of every wound, every fear, every learned association your life has fed into it. And it acts on that history 7 seconds before you know it has. So what do you do with that? There is a temptation to hear all of this and feel powerless. If the decision is already made before I know I am making it, then what is the point of thinking at all? But that framing misses something important. Awareness changes the relationship, not the mechanism. You cannot slow the brain down or choose to run your decisions through a different system. But you can create conditions that shape what the unconscious system is working with. You can observe patterns in your own choices over time and recognize where the ancient hardware is steering you somewhere you did not actually want to go. You can create deliberate pauses, not to override the unconscious, but to introduce new information before the fast system settles on a conclusion. Researchers studying this have found that even small interventions can shift outcomes. Sleeping on a decision genuinely changes what the brain decides, not because consciousness took over, but because the unconscious system had more time to process. Writing down competing options before choosing activates regions of the brain that influence which patterns get weighted. These are not tricks to make you more rational. They are inputs that feed the actual decision maker, the part of you that decides before you do. You are not in control in the way you thought you were. That is the hard part. But the system that is in control is not random, not careless, and not working against you. It is running a program written by millions of years of survival and a lifetime of experience. It just does not ask for your approval first. Right now, you are reading these final words and forming a response. You have already decided whether this changed something. The feeling of deciding is arriving now. The decision itself arrived a long time ago.